Hey, what is going on, everybody? It is Luke Beller with the Sideline Scoop. So what I wanted to do in today's video is basically take a look at Mike Gesicki. He's a guy who I think is a fantasy sleeper right now, a guy who you can sort of target later in your drafts and get lots of value from him, I think, in 2020. And so in this video, it's going to be part one of a series on, I'm going to do 3 total series, so part 1, part 2, and part 3. Basically going over 3 tight ends that are being picked like outside the top 5, probably maybe all outside the top 10. We'll sort of see exactly where they will be, but some guys who aren't being picked early in drafts, so you can sort of find guys who you just like a little bit later in your drafts, and you can sort of choose those guys so you can stack up on other positions. Because when it comes to the tight end position, at least for me, I think like the 2 strategies that sort of work are you either get one of those top guys in the beginning of your drafts, or you find a guy later or 2 guys later that you like and you sort of hope for the best with them. Because when it comes to the tight end position, it's usually the first couple guys off the board who, you sort of know what you can get from them. But then when it comes after the first few guys, then from that point on, it's a little bit more, you just don't really know exactly what you're going to get from them. And so you might as well just wait later and get a guy who, has a potential of doing well when it comes to the season. And if they don't, oh well, you can find a guy on the waiver wire. And I just think it's sort of the best way to go about things. So the first guy I want to take a look at is Mike Gesicki. And if we take a look at him from his stats from last year, of course you can see this on your screen right now, but so he had 5 touchdowns, 570 receiving yards, and he finished as the 11th tight end when it came to fantasy points for the tight end position. I don't know why it says 25 here. I don't know what that is, but I know he finished as the 11th when it comes to fantasy points, and that's standard leagues. And if we take a look at PPR here, I'll click that. That didn't change. But I think he's 11th or 12th when it comes to PPR as well. And so last season he did pretty good. He was in the top 12, which isn't too bad for a tight end. But one thing I think that's important to take a look at is sort of how well he did when it came to the first 10 games versus the last 6 games of the season. Because if we take a look at him, he finished as the 11th and 12th in standard and PPR in 2020. But if we take a look at his first 10 weeks of the 2020 season, he was ranked as a 30th tight end. And in his final, 6 weeks, he was ranked as the 8th tight end. And so I think it's those last weeks that really show what his potential is. And so here, I'm going to switch over to another site right now to sort of to show you guys basically the split of how he did in those games. So if you guys don't know what RotoViz is, let me get this here. Hopefully this is going well. All right, I'm still up there, so we're good. But RotoViz is basically a site. Most of you might know what it is, some of you might not. But it's just a fantasy site. They have lots of cool tools you can use, and it is. I think you pay a little bit for it. It's not free, but I think it's a few bucks or something. I don't remember exactly how much it is. But basically, you can like look at splits. And so, as I was saying, in his first 10 games last season, he was ranked as a 30th ranked tight end. But in his final 7, he was ranked as a tight end 8. So if we take a look in split here is those first games, so the first 10 weeks. So he must have been entered a couple games to start that season. But as you can see here, he was only averaging 6.45 PPR points per game. He was averaging about 3 receptions per game, about 4.6 targets per game. But as you can see, after week 10, he really got an uptick in his performance, almost doubled his fantasy points, went from 6.45 to 12.34 PPR points per game. He started getting some more targets, not too many more, but from 3 to 3.86 per game, which is a little bit substantial. And one of the biggest things to take a look at is basically his touchdowns. In his first 8 games, he had 0 touchdowns, but in his final 7, I think he had 5 touchdowns. So his touchdown pace went up a ton. And one thing I'm going to touch on a little later is basically his end zone targets went up a ton as well. So we'll touch on that in a second. But as you can see, when it comes to drafting him in 2020, I think that you sort of, when you look at this and you look at this, basically this potential here, he was ranked as a tight end 8 in fantasy. And right now, if we take a look at his ADP, I have that saved here as well. So if we go to look at his ADP, I think it's this link here. Yeah. So right now he's being taken as a 15th. This is Fantasy Pros for you guys who don't know. He's being taken as a 15th guy in ADP. It's averaging ESPN, MFL, FFC, a few different sites, but about 15th. So what we see his potential from last season with him being able to finish as a tight end 8 over those 7 games. I think that he has a potential to do that in 2020 as well. And so being able to pick him as 15th tight end, I think he has top 10 upside. And so he's really a good guy to target. But then I also want to show you guys a few other things that I think are basically just important to look at and reasons why I think he will do even better than he did last season. So if we take a look at the tight end position, some of the best tight ends, one of the biggest keys when you look at sort of the, I guess the patterns between the top tight ends is that lots of them spend lots of their time lining up in the slot position. Because if you take a look, the highest scoring fantasy tight ends, Kelsey, Kittle, and Mark Andrews, they all ranked in the top 6 when it came to slot receptions per game. And so that's sort of a big factor when you look at tight ends. And when we take a look at Mike Gesicki, he spent a lots of time in the slot position for the Dolphins last season, and he actually led the league in slot snap percentage with 71.8% of snaps from the slot. He had the second most receptions in the slot with 35, and the second most targets with 52, and the fourth most receiving yards with 382. So the fact that the Dolphins are using him in the slot, it really just shows that he has the potential of these other guys who are getting top 6, like Kelsey, Kittle, and Mark Andrews, who also had lots of time in the slot. It's just a good spot for Mike Gesicki to be, and because of that, I think he has lots of upside, and that's sort of a thing that I think is important to take a look at when it comes to Gesicki. He's just sort of in the right position when it comes to where he should be to get the most points as a fantasy tight end in 2020. Another interesting stat to take a look at is the Dolphins use him a lot as a vertical threat, because if you take a look at his ADOT, which is basically average depth of target, he's averaging 11.2 yards per target, which ranked 3rd last season. And if you take a look at his deep plays last year, he had 8 plays of over 15 yards, which ranked 4th of 17 tight ends who had more than 25 targets. So he is basically a guy who is getting the ball deep, and that sort of gives him the ability to, of course, score more points if he is getting the ball deep, obviously. And so I think that just 2 of those factors, being in the slot a lot, being targeted on deep routes, 2 big keys that I think will allow him to break out and do even better in the 2020 season. And then the third thing I want to take a look at too is basically how much he's getting targeted in the end zone. And so last year he ranked 3rd in the NFL in total end zone targets. He had 10 end zone targets. And so that is a good thing, of course, because we want him catching the ball. We want him to score. So of course it's good if he has end zone targets. That's a benefit. One crazy thing, as I was showing you the splits earlier, 9 of his 10 end zone targets came from weeks 12 to 17. And so I think if he can keep up that pace that he had in those final games, like final 6, final 7 games, just sort of being targeted as much in the end zone as he was, then I really think he can be a top 10 guy for sure. And so being able to pick him as a 15th guy, it really just gives you lots of upside when it comes to picking Mike Gesicki. And so I think that those are sort of some of the factors that just sort of show that he has a potential to really do well this season. Being in the slot, getting deep targets, getting end zone targets, lots of things are sort of lining up for him. And of course, there is still some uncertainty, which is why he's being picked 15th. But I still think there's a lot to like about him. He's in a good situation. There's not much else competition besides Devontae Parker on the Dolphins receiving core. There's not really any guys who are, beasts, really, I guess you could say. But so I really like the position that Gesicki is in, and that's why I put him as this first guy when it comes to this part 3 series of 3 basically sleeper tight ends who I think just could be valuable for your fantasy team. And so that's basically going to be all for this video. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope you guys got some value from it. If you did, feel free to like it down below. And if you want to see some more fantasy football content, don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any more videos. So that's going to be all for this video. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you guys on the next one.